What's up, y'all? It's Ty back here with another video, and in this video today we are going to be ranking the 2015 NBA draft on a tier list. Now there's gonna be basically guys, as you guys can see here, everybody that basically played in the NBA are going to be featured. So some guys not featured: pick 26, Nikola, I don't even know how to pronounce his last name. He is not going to be featured. Pick number 36, Juan Pablo Volet is not going to be featured. Pick 42, Oliver Hanlon isn't going to be featured. So just something to kind of think about as I do go through this. Basically, every relevant player from the 2015 NBA draft is going to end up being ranked. Now we're going to start it off obviously with the number 1 overall pick in Karl Anthony Towns. Now, when I look at this 2015 NBA draft, the question I would have is, in a redraft, where would Cat go? And obviously, again, we'll talk about that as we rank them, but I don't see any reason Cat would not be an S tier overall player. Now, how I want to rank them is I'm just going to rank them by overall how good they are, but I'm going to be talking about how good each player is for that respective pick as well. So for me, obviously, I do think a Cat is an S tier overall player. For a number 1 pick, I mean, I would say he's like an average number 1 pick. Like, it's not like he's going to be like a Anthony Edwards, Victor Wembanyama type of player, but he's, you know, an all-star level caliber player. I do think he is an S tier overall level player. D'Angelo Russell up next out of the Ohio State University. Again, when I'm looking at this draft, I don't think there's a lot of top talent, so I'm going to put D'Angelo Russell in A tier. For the number 2 overall pick, he'd probably be in C or D tier, though. Like, he's been a fine NBA player. He's just not been necessarily a number 2 pick level. A tier overall, but for that number 2 pick, probably C or D. Jahlil Okafor up next. I mean, when you talk about Jahlil Okafor as a number 3 pick, he's probably like F tier. I can't sit here and say he was worthless, but just not necessarily great, even compared to some of his peers. I go C tier with Jahlil Okafor, only playing in 247 career games. Just not great. Kristaps Porzingis, I'm going to throw him at A tier. Now, one of the reasons I have Cat over Kristaps Porzingis is health. Like, Kristaps throughout his career has been pretty, banged up, injured. Obviously has been really good with Boston. I just think A tier is the right spot. For that number 4 pick, though, he's closer to S tier than anything. Like, a very good value at that number 4 pick. Mario Hezonja, like, he's actually played in quite a few games. Just overall not great. I'm going to put him in the same tier as Jahlil Okafor, but for his pick the higher, maybe like a D tier, C tier, where Jahlil Okafor probably was in that F tier. Willie Cauley-Stein, when he was at Kentucky, man, I thought this guy was going to be so good. Do think he had a better career than both of these guys, but not great. B tier, maybe I need to move these guys lower and Willie Cauley-Stein lower. I think that's what I got to do, because when I'm looking at this tier list, a lot of these guys did find an NBA role and just was just more impactful than Willie Cauley-Stein. Next up, Emmanuel Mudiay. When I'm looking at guys that did craft out a role, I don't necessarily think Mudiay ever really did that to an elite level. For the number 7 pick, I mean, he was fine, but not really good. I mean, C tier, and for that number 7 pick, probably like even a D tier type status. Just not great. Stanley Johnson, man. I always thought Stanley Johnson, shout out, LeBron gave him a shout out in one of the podcasts, I do believe. I always thought he was going to end up finding an NBA role, but he just never really did. I'm going to throw him at C tier overall. Again, for that number 8 pick, probably like a C tier, D tier, just not great. Frank Kaminsky, another C tier type player. He was fine. He's actually had some decent roles on some decent teams, but overall, just okay. Like, I mean, there's nothing really about his career that blows you away. Same thing with Justice Winslow. Like, C tier. They had better careers than Jahlil Okafor as well as Hezonja. But it's like, I mean, even with Justice Winslow, only 344 games. Just not great. Miles Turner, I'm going to put him at A tier. For this pick, he's got to be close to an S tier pick. I mean, at number 11, you got to steal out of Miles Turner. He's played in a ton of games. His health has been pretty good. Trey Lyles up next. I think I got to put Trey Lyles ahead of these guys because he's had a better career. And I'm not saying he's been perfect, but Trey Lyles has had a really productive career so far. It amazes me that he is in this draft class because every time I look at Trey Lyles, I think he's like an old, like veteran type player. Devin Booker up next, S tier on this list, and for his draft pick being at number 13, maybe the best player at his draft pick, maybe on this entire list. Like Devin Booker is a really good player. I don't like him. I don't like watching him play, but no doubt about it, D-Book is really, really, really solid. Campaign up next. Campaign, again, for number 14 pick is actually okay. Gonna put him at C tier overall, but Campaign, he's had some really productive years. Kelly Oubre Jr. up next. I mean, B tier overall. Like, Kelly Oubre Jr. has been really good, especially for that number 15 overall draft pick. It's crazy, like, you look at some of these guys that got drafted ahead of him, and you're like, what? Stanley Johnson over Kelly Oubre Jr.? How does that even make sense? But when you backcheck it, when they go back to college, you'd probably see the vision. Terry Rozier, I'm going to go B tier as well. Now, actually, this one's tough. Had some really good years, and that's why I'm thinking I'm going to put him in A tier. I'm going to. I think Terry Rozier deserves A tier, especially for how good he was, back in his younger days. And if he can stay healthy, I think he could possibly get back to getting there. Rashad Vaughn up next. For a number 17 pick, it doesn't get much worse. I mean, only 3 years in the league, was bad in his time here. He's going F tier. Rashad Vaughn, horrible. Next up, Sam Dekker. I mean, is Sam Dekker just as bad? I mean, not quite. He at least lasted a little longer, but Sam Dekker bad as well. Never really found his footing in the NBA. D tier for Sam Dekker. Jerian Grant up next out of Notre Dame. I don't even know where I'd go with him. He was not good, and he's not been good in his career. I mean, maybe crafted out a little bigger role throughout his career, but again, in and out of the league in 5 years, I'm going to go D tier with him. For their draft picks, you're looking at Rashad Vaughn, Sam Dekker, Jerian Grant. Like, all three guys, bust for their specific pick. I'll be the one to say it. And then you get DeLon Wright, who, again, for his draft pick, is probably like an A tier caliber player. Like DeLon Wright with the 20th overall pick, an absolute steal. He's probably a B tier player. Like DeLon Wright's had very good years. Just kind of that solid role player that you can trust to have on the court for you. I'm a big DeLon Wright fan. Justin Anderson up next. Gonna go C tier. Was in the league for 6 years. Bobby Portis up next. I'm going to go A tier with Bobby Portis. Bobby Portis, for his draft pick, is probably like an S tier caliber player for his specific draft pick. Drafted 22nd overall, has found a big time role, have been a big time player on some big time teams. Easy A tier for Bobby Portis. Rondae Hollis-Jefferson up next. I mean, I always thought would find a role, and he just never did. Still lasted, 6 years in the league. I'm going to go D tier. Tyus Jones up next. I mean, I think B tier is where Tyus belongs, but Tyus has had some really good years. You could maybe argue A tier, but again, I think A tiers are guys that have just gotten to a more elite level than Tyus has. But I'd take Tyus Jones in a heartbeat. Jarrell Martin up next. Never really got it figured out in the NBA. Larry Nance Jr. up next. Larry for the 27th overall pick. Great role player that, you can go out and trust on the court. Larry Nance Jr. for being the 27th overall pick, an absolute steal. RJ Hunter never found his footing in the league. I mean, I'll go F tier. Chris McCullough, F tier. Again, you guys probably don't even know who Chris McCullough is. F tier. Kevon Looney, I'll give him B tier. Kevon Looney had some great years. He kind of fell out of the rotation this most recent season, but he had some great years with the Golden State Warriors. Easy addition to B tier for me. Cedi Osman, although crafted NBA will grade him out as one of the worst players in the league, I'll go B tier with Cedi Osman. Again, had some great years in his prime. Montrezl Harrell's a weird one. In his prime was like an A tier player, but he just kind of had a crazy fall off. Like, it's crazy to me how young Montrezl Harrell is, and that he was once a 6th man of the year, now basically doesn't even play in the league anymore. But I still think at Harrell's prime, he's got to be A tier, no? Like, I don't know. I think that's maybe overdoing it a little bit. I'm going to give him A tier, though. You guys can hate me if you want, but he was a 6th man of the year. I'm going to give him A tier. For the 32nd pick would be an S tier player for his specific pick. Jordan Mickey up next. Again, F tier. Anthony Brown, F tier. Willie Hernangomez, I mean, he's found a decent role on some teams. I'll give him C tier. Like, again, for a 35th pick, actually made some things shake, but C tier is where he belongs. Raheem Christmas, I liked him in college, F tier. Rashawn Holmes, again, another guy that's kind of found a role on some teams. Obviously, throughout his career, I think he's been better than even a guy like Willie Hernangomez. I'll give Rashawn Holmes B tier. We're up to number 38. With the number 38 pick, they took Deron Hillard. I mean, F tier. Josh Richardson at pick 40 is an absolute steal. Josh Richardson's top 5 or top 6 on my list in minutes played. I mean, that has to deserve some respect, and in Josh Richardson's prime has been really, 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 really good. I do not get the Pat Connaughton disrespect. Somebody told me, oh, I don't want to see him play for Milwaukee anymore. Pat Connaughton for the 41st pick panned out in a big time way. Joe Young up next. I mean, F tier. Andrew Harrison, you were good at Kentucky. F tier. Again, for their picks, you wouldn't ever expect them to be too good. Norman Powell, pick 46 was Norman Powell. And I gotta go A tier. If you're talking about where they were drafted, Norman Powell is the biggest steal of this draft, quite possibly. I mean, for being the 46th overall pick. Dakari Johnson never really had a role in the league. Sir Dominic Pointer up next was selected here with the 53rd pick. And the NBA never really had a productive career. Brandon Dawson, Sir Dominic Pointer, F tier. But again, for their draft picks, you can never expect too much out of them. I rank these cards on how good of careers they've overall had. But again, if you want to rank them for how good they were for their specific pick, Miles Turner might be up. Bobby Portis up. Montrezl Harrell up. I'd move Cat down a tier probably, maybe down 2 tiers, because for the number 1 pick, you have way more hype. Even a guy like Josh Richardson, I'm probably moving up a tier. But let me know who I ultimately was too high on, too low on, and who is the biggest steal of the draft. That's going to wrap it up for my video today, guys. Drop a like on it, subscribe if you're new, and as always, man, I love you guys. Have a blessed day.